Officer James Carter was used to quiet days on the rural highway. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the fields. He and his partner, Officer Diaz, were on a routine patrol, checking for speeding cars, broken taillights, or anything unusual. Most of the time, these drives were peaceful, almost boring. But Carter knew that calm days could turn into something unexpected in a matter of minutes. As they drove, Carter's eyes scanned the road ahead. That's when he noticed an old truck slowly making its way along the asphalt. The truck was dusty and rusted, the kind of vehicle that had clearly seen better days. One of its taillights flickered weakly, almost like it was giving up on life. Carter instinctively slowed down and gestured to Diaz. "Take a look at that," he said quietly. Diaz nodded and watched the truck through his side mirror. "Old model," he said. "Looks like it hasn't been to a shop in years." Carter felt a small nod of curiosity. Something about the truck, the way it lumbered along the road, made him think it might need a quick check. It wasn't unusual for officers to stop vehicles with broken lights, but there was something about this one that drew his attention. He turned on the siren light, signaling the truck to pull over. The truck began to slow, eventually rolling to the side of the road near a small dirt patch. Carter pulled in behind it. The engine of the truck coughed once, then settled into a low hum. The driver's window rolled down and an elderly man appeared. His hair was white, neatly combed, and he wore a simple cap. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, and his eyes, though calm, seemed to carry years of quiet experience. "Good evening, sir," Carter said, his voice polite but firm. "Do you know why I stopped you?" The man smiled faintly. "Evening, officer." "I think it's the taillight, isn't it?" he asked, his voice steady and soft. "That's right," Carter said, nodding. "I noticed it flickering back there." "Can I see your license and registration?" The elderly man quickly handed over the papers. Carter took them and glanced at the information. Everything appeared normal. No outstanding tickets, no warrants. Diaz leaned over slightly to look. "Nothing unusual," he muttered. Carter studied the man for a moment. There was a calmness about him, almost like he had seen a lot in his life. His answers were precise, polite, and clear. Carter had been a cop for over 15 years, and he had seen all kinds of people, some nervous, some angry, some evasive. This man was neither nervous nor evasive. He was just calm. "Where are you headed this evening?" Carter asked, keeping the tone friendly. "Oh, just to the store down in Milltown," the man replied. "I need a few groceries, and then I'll be heading home." Carter nodded. He could feel that familiar mix of responsibility and slight irritation. He didn't want to be rude, but he had to follow procedure. "Everything looks fine with your documents, sir. I'm just going to run a quick check on the vehicle, okay?" "Of course, officer," the man said, still calm. Carter returned to his patrol car and keyed in the truck's information. The minutes passed slowly, each second making Carter more aware of the quiet tension on this quiet road. Finally, the screen blinked green, no issues, no alerts. Carter let out a small sigh. He returned to the truck, handing the papers back to the elderly man. "Everything checks out," he said. "I'm going to let you go with a warning for the taillight. Make sure it gets fixed soon, all right?" "Thank you, officer," the man said politely. "I appreciate it," Carter gave a small nod. "Drive safely, sir." The elderly man started the truck again, and it slowly rumbled back onto the road. Carter and Diaz watched as it disappeared into the distance, dust rising behind the wheels. As the truck turned a bend, Carter felt a strange mix of relief and unease. It was a simple traffic stop, nothing more. But there was something about the man, the way he had handled everything, that stuck with him. "Too calm, don't you think?" Carter said quietly to Diaz as they continued driving. "Yeah," Diaz replied, almost like he knew this was coming and was ready for it. "Not nervous at all," Carter nodded. "Exactly. Something about him. I can't explain it. But it doesn't feel like an ordinary old man in a rusty truck." They drove on in silence for a few minutes, the sun sinking lower. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the encounter than a simple traffic stop. It was like a quiet ripple in the usual flow of life. Something small but noticeable. Later, at the edge of town, Carter found himself glancing down the same stretch of road, half expecting to see the old truck again, but it was gone, leaving only the fading tracks of dust. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. "Probably nothing," he muttered to himself. "Just an old man on his way home." Still, there was a lingering sense of curiosity. Carter had seen a lot in his years on the force. Strange events, unusual people, but there was a certain dignity in the elderly man's presence. Something about the calmness, the careful way he answered questions, suggested a life lived with experience and quiet authority. Diaz noticed Carter's thoughtful expression. "You're thinking too much about this," he said with a grin. "It's just a traffic stop." "Maybe," Carter said, though his mind was still on the encounter. "But something tells me this old man's story isn't finished yet. Somehow I don't think we've seen the last of him." As they continued their patrol, the sky turned a deep orange and purple. The small town lights began to blink on one by one. Carter couldn't know it yet, but in just a short while the quiet life of this old truck, and the man who drove it, would intersect with theirs in a way that no routine patrol could have predicted. About an hour after the routine traffic stop, Officer James Carter and his partner, Officer Diaz, were driving along the same stretch of road. The sun had dipped lower, and the sky was painted in shades of pink and purple. The day felt calm, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air that neither officer could explain. They were used to quiet drives like this, yet something about today felt different. As they turned a curve, they noticed a convoy approaching in the distance. Several sleek black SUVs and official-looking vehicles moved slowly down the road, lights flashing but without the usual sirens. Carter instinctively slowed down and signaled Diaz. "Look at that," he said. "That's not an everyday convoy." Diaz squinted. "Definitely not. Whoever's in those cars is important. Military, maybe?" As the vehicles approached, the officers pulled to the side of the road, their lights flashing briefly to signal other traffic to stop. Drivers slowed down, some pulling over to let the convoy pass. The sound of engines and the faint hum of flashing lights made the atmosphere tense yet respectful. Carter felt the familiar mix of duty and curiosity. The lead SUV came to a stop right in front of their patrol car. Carter and Diaz stepped out, alert but cautious. From inside the vehicle, a distinguished-looking man slowly opened the door. His uniform was immaculate, adorned with a series of stars and medals that instantly caught Carter's attention. It didn't take long for him to recognize the insignia. 4 stars, the mark of a United States Army general. Carter's heart skipped a beat. He had seen generals before, but never this close, and certainly never under circumstances like this. The general stepped down with a calm but confident demeanor, his eyes scanning the surroundings briefly before resting on the officers. "Good evening, officers," the general said in a firm but kind voice. "I hope I'm not causing too much trouble." Carter found himself fumbling slightly. "No, sir," he stammered. "You're not causing any trouble at all. We were just handling traffic, making sure the road was clear for your convoy." The general nodded. "I appreciate that. Safety is important, and it seems you two are doing a fine job." Diaz, usually quick with his words, looked slightly stunned. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. Carter's mind raced. He tried to connect the dots. Could it be the elderly man from the old truck earlier? Could it really be the same person? The idea seemed impossible, yet the calm authority, the measured movements, and the quiet confidence felt familiar. Carter could hardly believe it, but he couldn't shake the thought that he had just encountered the general in disguise, traveling quietly and observing life like any ordinary citizen. The general extended his hand, and Carter shook it, feeling the firmness and strength behind it. "Thank you for your service," the general said sincerely. "It's officers like you who keep our community safe every day. I know the job can be routine, sometimes frustrating, but it matters more than you might realize." Carter felt a mix of pride and humility. The words coming from this high-ranking officer made him pause and reflect on the small, often overlooked actions officers take every day. Every stop, every check, every moment of patience, it all mattered. The general then turned to Diaz. "And thank you for being vigilant. You never know what situations you might encounter, and your attention to detail makes a real difference." Diaz nodded, feeling honored and slightly overwhelmed. The general's presence was impressive, yet there was something approachable and human about him. He wasn't just a symbol of rank. He was a person who understood the value of ordinary work and respected it. The officers watched as the rest of the convoy moved on, their black SUVs disappearing down the road, leaving only the fading sound of engines. Carter and Diaz were left standing there, stunned and speechless, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Carter spoke, his voice low. "Diaz, do you think Could it have been the man from the old truck? Diaz thought for a moment. It makes sense, he said slowly. The calmness, the precision, the way he carried himself. It's exactly how he acted before. I think we might have just stopped a four-star general without even knowing it. Carter shook his head in disbelief. We treated him like a routine traffic stop. And it turns out he's someone extraordinary. I don't know. Embarrassed, but also honored. Diaz laughed softly. Yeah, we were probably thinking it was just another old man trying to get home. Who would have guessed? The two officers walked back to their patrol car, the weight of the encounter settling in. Carter reflected on the earlier stop, remembering the polite and composed demeanor of the elderly man. He realized that appearances could be deceiving. Even someone who seemed ordinary might carry an extraordinary presence or story behind them. Back in the patrol car, Carter and Diaz began writing their reports, but it was hard to focus. Their minds kept drifting back to the convoy, the handshake and the words of the general. It wasn't just a surprising encounter. It was a lesson in humility, respect, and awareness. They had treated every person with courtesy and professionalism, as they were trained to do, and in return, they had been met with gratitude from someone whose life and rank they could hardly imagine. Carter glanced out the window, thinking about the quiet truck on the rural highway. The world was full of people living ordinary lives, yet some of them were extraordinary in ways the eye could not immediately see. He realized that every encounter, no matter how small or routine, had the potential to teach a lesson or leave a lasting impression. Diaz finally broke the silence. You know, Carter, I think we'll be telling this story for a long time. It's not every day you meet a four-star general on a quiet road after a routine stop. Carter nodded with a smile. Yeah, and we'll never look at an old truck the same way again. The night settled in, stars beginning to twinkle above the highway. Carter and Diaz continued their patrol, but something had changed. The day that had started as ordinary had turned into something remarkable, a story that would stay with them for the rest of their careers. They had learned that life had a way of surprising you, often in the most unexpected and humbling ways. And somewhere down that road, the elderly man in the old truck had returned to his journey, quietly observing, blending into the world, leaving behind a lesson about respect, humility, and the extraordinary nature of ordinary people. After the unexpected encounter with the convoy, Officer James Carter and Officer Diaz returned to their routine patrol. But the quiet of the night felt different. The road seemed narrower, the stars brighter, and every small sound carried more meaning. Both officers were thinking about the four-star general who had stepped out of the black SUV, shaking hands with them, and speaking words of appreciation. It was a moment that neither of them would forget. As they drove, Carter thought back to the earlier traffic stop with the elderly man in the old truck. At first, it had seemed like just a minor, routine task, nothing out of the ordinary. But now, after witnessing the motorcade, Carter's mind was filled with questions. Could the calm, polite, and precise man he had stopped really have been the general? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed possible. He realized that in that brief encounter, he had been interacting with someone extraordinary without even knowing it. Diaz glanced at Carter, noticing the thoughtful look on his partner's face. You okay? He asked. Carter nodded slowly. Yeah, I just can't stop thinking about it. It's a reminder. A reminder that sometimes we meet people who are living extraordinary lives, but we only see the ordinary part of them. Diaz smiled. You're right. I mean, we treat everyone the same, polite, professional, but some of them, they're on a whole other level, and we wouldn't even know it unless we pay attention. Carter couldn't agree more. For the rest of the night, the officers patrolled their area with a heightened sense of awareness. Every car they stopped, every driver they checked, felt a little different. They realized that while they were performing routine duties, their work could intersect with people whose lives held experiences and responsibilities far beyond what anyone could imagine. The story of the elderly man and the four-star general quickly spread through the precinct. Carter and Diaz shared their experience with their colleagues, who listened in amazement. Some laughed, imagining the ordinary man they had almost scolded for a broken taillight being the same general who commanded thousands of troops. Others nodded thoughtfully, understanding the lesson about humility and awareness. In the following days, Carter reflected on the encounter again and again. He thought about how easily he could have judged the man simply by his appearance. A rusty old truck, a quiet demeanor, and missed the extraordinary story behind it. He realized that life had a way of teaching lessons in subtle, unexpected ways. Sometimes it wasn't about the big events, but the small, ordinary moments that carried the greatest lessons. Carter also thought about the general's words of gratitude. They were not empty words. They carried a genuine acknowledgement of the officer's work. It reminded him that every small act of responsibility, patience, and respect mattered. Every day on the road, every traffic stop, every interaction with the public, it all contributed to a larger purpose, even if it wasn't immediately visible. Diaz shared similar reflections. He began to see his job not just as enforcing rules or maintaining order, but as a way to connect with people, understand their stories, and make small but meaningful contributions to the community. The encounter with the general became more than just a story. It became a source of inspiration and motivation. One evening, a week later, Carter found himself driving down the same rural highway alone. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the fields. As he rounded a familiar bend, he noticed an old truck slowly moving along the road. For a moment, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be him again? The thought made him smile quietly to himself. He didn't stop the truck this time. He simply watched it pass, wondering about the life inside, the stories it carried, and the lessons it might teach. He realized that life was full of ordinary people with extraordinary experiences. Some would reveal themselves in unexpected ways, while others would remain quietly remarkable, leaving only a lasting impression on those who crossed their paths. Back at the precinct, Carter and Diaz shared their reflections with younger officers, emphasizing the lessons they had learned. "Always treat people with respect," Carter said. "You never know what you're dealing with. Appearances can be deceiving, and every interaction matters. That small act of courtesy can leave an impact far beyond what you expect," Diaz added. "And never underestimate the ordinary. Sometimes the people who seem quiet and unassuming are the ones who have the greatest stories, the most experience, and the most wisdom. Pay attention, be humble, and do your job well. That's how you make a difference." The story of the old truck and the four-star general became something of a legend at the precinct. Officers would tell it to each other with a mix of humor and respect, a reminder that life could surprise you at any moment. It reminded them that no matter how routine a day might seem, extraordinary moments could appear when least expected. For Carter and Diaz, the experience changed the way they approached their work. They became more observant, more thoughtful, and more patient with the people they met. They carried the lesson of humility, respect, and awareness with them every day. It reminded them that their job, while sometimes routine, had meaning and purpose far beyond what the eye could see. And somewhere, far away from the rural highway and the patrol cars, the elderly man in the old truck returned to his quiet life. Perhaps he was the four-star general. Perhaps he was simply an ordinary man with extraordinary experiences. Either way, he had left a lasting impression on two officers who would never forget the lesson he taught. That life is full of surprises, that appearances are not always what they seem, and that small, ordinary moments can carry extraordinary significance. Carter drove home that night, thinking about the sun setting over the fields, the fading sound of tires on asphalt, and the quiet, remarkable people who passed through life unnoticed. He realized that he had been part of something special, something that would stay with him forever. It wasn't just a traffic stop or a convoy or a handshake. It was a reminder that respect, humility, and awareness could change the way you saw the world, one ordinary moment at a time.